welcome back to the Meebits Podcast. I'm very, very excited to be here for episode 12 with a really dear friend, Natalie Stone, former punk lead at Yuga Labs, and now leading her own startup, Stoneworks. Hi, Stone. Welcome to the Meebits Podcast.
Hi, so happy to be here. And also, Meebit holder, I would like to note.
Yes, let's go. I will love to talk about that here in a minute. But welcome to the podcast. It's so good to see you. I know you spent the summer in Europe, kind of like taking a break while you transitioned off the Punks lead role. Now that the Node Foundation has acquired the CryptoPunks IP, but tell us a little bit more. Like, how's the last few months been for you now that you're like a private citizen again?
Yeah, private citizen. I think Beauty and Punk started that. But yeah, I think it was really important, like for me, once the project transitioned to have like not only a mental break for me, just generally, it has been kind of an intense year, but um sorry about that. I realize hopefully you didn't hear that. Yeah, it's been a little bit of an intense year. But I also wanted to create some distance between me and the CryptoPunks project as I knew and lived and breathed it. As you know, I'm still consulting for Node and still working on CryptoPunks, as I think most people know, but it's in a different capacity. And yeah, I mean, it's been honestly great. I feel like I have my head on straight, and Stonework has had really amazing, great response, and there's been excitement and interest in working with me. So I've been happy and thriving creatively.
Love that. And you can see it, you're just shining. I love that. Now, for those the audience that might not know you from
Yeah.
even like the Yuga days, can you walk us a little bit as to your professional background prior to Yuga? I know you were doing some really cool stuff in the Web 2 side of the world. Yeah, we'd love to hear a little bit more from you.
Yeah. Well, I guess maybe over 15 years ago, I got hit at the intersection of art and technology, and I've never left. And so, yeah, I started actually in the music industry, but I really was always drawn to this idea of like new tools, new technology, and how do I help artists play with those. So I was at Google for a long time, really when like AI was really just something they were experimenting with conceptually. So I was working with Project Magenta on some music projects. I was working with Google Arts and Culture, supporting some new media initiatives there. And then from there, I went over, I kind of felt that I had kind of reached a point at Google where, you can either just get really comfy and you're and you're essentially kind of like stuck there forever, the golden handcuffs, or I wanted to try more and I got curious, and NFTs was this new frontier that was emerging, and I came over to CryptoPunks and it changed my life completely. I mean, I really think that on every single level, from the friendships that I made there to the opportunities I've gotten in the traditional art world representing CryptoPunks, and also just learning about this really iconic and sacred project that Matt and John created. So yeah, that's a very brief overview. I don't want to bore people with my CV.
No, I love it. I think that people don't know about the Google background. I think
Yeah.
it's obviously a lot of the quality of the work that you guys did with Yuga reflected a lot of having that background. So it's pretty cool to
Yeah.
see.
No, it was even though CryptoPunks, I in a lot of ways feel like I like stepped in to the most like sacred, profound project. It also had been like a lifetime of work that had brought me there, experimenting with artists like LCD, Childish Gambino, Flaming Lips, different initiatives in VR, AR, all of that. So to come to blockchain and to come to CryptoPunks was really the natural next step. So.
When was the first time you heard about CryptoPunks?
My partner was actually experimenting in NFTs. He's a musician. And so I was like, oh, what is this world? And kind of more exploring it from the music side, actually. And first first time you explore, the first thing you're going to come to is CryptoPunks. I mean, it's even the most nominal amount of research brings you to CryptoPunks. So it was during that time that I heard about CryptoPunks and was curious about CryptoPunks, and of course they felt out of reach. Um, and yeah, that's truthfully my anticlimactic first time I heard about CryptoPunks. was researching.
No, it's great. I mean, you research. Most of us were just like, just like trying to figure out what we're doing with crypto. And then next thing you know, you're like the punk lead at a very interesting time. I think not just for punks and Yuga, but really for the NFT industry, past its first cycle prime. A lot of people, a lot of expectations, a lot of hope kind of deflated. Values definitely had deflated from the financial perspective. And so you come into this role, and I mean, that's the first time I came across you was when you got announced, which is an interesting experience we could
It's
potentially
just been
talk
24
about later.
hours. No, well, I mean, I think like first of all, like credit to where it's due. When Yuga acquired CryptoPunks, they brought on Noah, who had such a strong art background and really such a passion for the preservation and of punks. And then Noah and I started working together. Almost right away. And there was a year that I was behind the scenes working with Noah, and I learned a lot from him. And I also spent a year just quietly lurking and learning about this amazing community. And then, yeah, that first moment, in some ways it was hard to come in to the space when it was losing its meteoric momentum and facing such challenges culturally, financially. But now that I look back on that, the fact that I came when people were paying their dues, and if you were there, you were there because you loved the project, the technology, the people. And so in a lot of ways, I think I actually got to experience the best people and the best parts of this space, even though the backdrop of it was hard and tenuous, for those still in it and making it happen and building in it.
Yeah, so I think I agree with you. Like coming in during slower times allow you to really understand why people are here, right? It's not just like the FOMO and the money and like the fame, and maybe just tread some water, right? That's really sink or swim, pretty much. It's trial by fire, and it was pretty cool to watch you build the brand, grow the community, support so many community events like the brunch, and it was amazing. Obviously, now we look back and punks are in major museums. There's a really cool art book around punks. There's a couple of other initiatives in the works. For us at Meebits or Meepco, Meebits are art, right? That is our North Star. That's the direction that we're building. I think Matt and John, at the first time I spoke with them, when I was making the acquisition, they're like, for us, maybe it's our digital sculptures, and that's ideally the direction I want you guys to take. And of course, artist intent means a lot, and so for us, maybe it's our digital sculptures that are fun and functional. So I reached out to Garga actually quite recently, and I was like, hey man, we're building in this direction, and I would love to know how Yuga was able to so successfully kind of like develop punk, because it does take some work, right? It's not like just things just magically happen. There's a lot of deserving artists and artworks art there, not just in crypto art, but across all types of mediums and so on. And so you definitely need somebody pushing things in the right direction. And he was like, listen, I would love to like give you the secret answer, but actually it was Stone who made it happen. It was Stone who like drove all of that. And he's like, you should really talk to her. And I'm like, oh, great. Well, we're friends. So that's amazing. Good to know. What was like your initial, and like, I guess, not intent, but like when you came into the punks, you're like, okay, we're going to develop these as art.
Yeah.
How did you envision that process happening?
Yeah. It's interesting because, there were potentially a lot of directions to take. And honestly, if we were going to honor what was Yuga's DNA, and what I think they really are masters at doing is community, like being a community clubhouse, essentially, right? And I think when we came in, we realized that, we honestly just were reflecting back what I think the community, or I believe the community in some way wanted, and also what I thought was so important, CryptoPunks being the first. So, I mean, I wish I could say that there was this clear, it was just so obvious. There was no other direction to take punks, but then how do you get from point A to B? Now that's the real journey. And that's, I think, the journey that you are on as well. And I think the first step was patience. and recognizing, I think I've talked about this before, but understanding like, okay, so how do we make CryptoPunks legible to an art audience? Like, how do we make someone who doesn't understand crypto, doesn't understand an NFT, even like maybe it hates and is anti NFTs? How do we get them to understand what's significant about CryptoPunks and in terms of the art trajectory in the art world? And I think that for the way that we did that was really through the exercise of starting the book. That was one aspect of this that was really allowed us to start to write, research, archive, all of that. And that making that foundation then made every single conversation easier, and then tailoring that conversation to these institutions. So I come from the perspective of starting that dialogue really first is do your homework, understand this collection, understand, what makes it special, understand all the layers, because that's the thing about CryptoPunks and Meebits too. There's a lot of ways that it is interesting, so how do you codify that and then also synthesize that so that it is digestible? And then from there, it's as much about listening and understanding what's happening. What is struggling? Why is the art world struggling? What do they need? What does this museum need? What are the politics of that place? And it's just a bit of time, patience, listening. So that's, I guess, how I approached it. We approached it.
No, that's amazing. Obviously we saw the result of that, but I always wondered, what was going on as far as like, everything you guys have to go through to position punks in a way that museums want to acquire them. Obviously, the book was a big success. The Avant Art print, huge success. I have mine hanging over my bed, which just reminds me every night of punks. Not that I need a reminder, but it's the first thing I see every morning and first thing I see before I go to bed. Um, what were like some of the biggest challenges? I mean, obviously there were some very public ones. I mean, we don't have to get into detail of those. I think that those have been litigated on crypto Twitter enough. But maybe some stuff that you could share with us as far as struggles in those conversations, specifically with like those big institutions, those curators who might not understand punks or crypto art. Like, what would you say were the biggest differences where we're trying to communicate that across?
Yeah, I think it's twofold, or I'd say one is actually the DNA of the project being tied to economics, in a lot of ways. And then the fact that the art world in a lot of ways wants to deny this, so in this way, CryptoPunks is this black mirror of the reality of what the art world actually is. So maybe the art world doesn't want to look in that mirror in some capacity. So I say that's one aspect of it. And then what made that very difficult, which you kind of just alluded to, is that, CryptoPunks being at Yuga was challenging in terms of the art world, because we'd have these conversations. There was this love for CryptoPunks, the fact that the DNA, especially that they were free and they were this experiment, that all really worked in some capacity. And then we'd get to this point where, oh, actually, you know what? We want a lot of money to, you need to pay to play, etc. So then there was this aspect of, a partnership team or corporate team getting involved in a conversation where at first it was sort of a little bit more pure, and so on some level, Yuga having those conversations was one of the challenges. And then I'd say the other challenge on some level is aesthetically challenging what people associate as art. And you'll see this like and I've this story I think is really telling. At the Centre Pompidou, they were very interested in the autoglyph, and they were less interested in having a CryptoPunk, and we there was this moment where they were like, oh, what is this? Is this video game art? The aesthetics of the CryptoPunk itself didn't necessarily fit some traditional art curators version of, oh, this is interesting art. And maybe because it leans towards abstraction, and that's maybe more what you see in these institutions. So with Meebits or CryptoPunks, especially even more with the Meebits, I mean, that's art in the 3D world. That art is around like the trajectory and the history of gaming, even more so than CryptoPunks, I would say. So I think it's like breaking that bias around what is art and what should it look like, and what should it behave like, and what should the collectors who hold it be, and CryptoPunks and Meebits don't fit any of those standards. It's breaking that mold a lot.
It's a couple of things that I want to kind of like double click on that are all tied together. I'm sure we're gonna get pulled in a tangent, but so obviously Punk's now under the Node Foundation, which is great, and I do want to briefly touch on that. But before we go there, for Centre Pompidou, if you're listening to this, the first time I ever went to a museum of art anywhere in the world was there. I was a 13-year-old and I walked in. The first thing I saw was a video of somebody using a toilet, and that was art. So you thought that was art, and then you were questioning punks and me. We have a problem. I did like what you said about the collector base not being what snobby art institutions would expect or would want, because it does. People say now like, oh, punks are not punk anymore because like funds own them and like rich people own them, but we're still punk in that sense. And me the same way. We're still very much different and outsiders, and I like that because that's at the core ethos of cryptos. Not like being like an unwanted person, but just really not having to go through a traditional token, traditional gated channels to get recognition or accepted into those types of conversations. So I'm glad that they still see us that way a
Yeah.
little bit, but that you were able to get past that.
And I think that Matt and John still see themselves that way. Like the way that they speak about themselves, they're not, they find it interesting to have, for lack of a better word, like art speak, contextualize CryptoPunks, and which obviously is what I've done more, but that's not how they speak about the project themselves. It's never overwrought, it's accessible, it's clear, and I think that that's something that's really special, actually. Even me, I would love to have more art speak on everything, but I think that level of pretentiousness, my partner, he's a musician. He has, I feel like I'm getting TMI here. His ex-wife actually also works in the art world, right? And he always said, "Oh, I hate being around it. I don't respond to visual art, blah, blah, blah." And then he's now part of this world, and he's like, "I want to do more in visual art. I love the conversations you're having with artists. Oh, your artist community is so interesting because all the pretension is ripped out, and we're talking about what we love. We talk about what we like. We talk about what challenges us. It's in a way, it has that purity and that authenticity that you find in, like, music, for example. Where does it move you? And why do you respond to this? Or why do you think it's interesting?" And I think that that's something, if we can bring in more people like him who actually had an aversion, and now we're get this world, and I love that, I love that.
That's amazing. It's just making me think of like experiencing that along the way. Didn't really like notice it, but as you were sharing that story, it got me thinking. And yeah, totally right. I really like that. That's what makes my heart beat, to see like the Meebits as art. Like I really like the fact that Matt and John see them as their digital sculptures. Before we move on to Matt and John, though, a little bit note, obviously Mickey and the team, they're incredible. And you mentioned you're working with them in kind of like an advisor capacity. Obviously, they still have a lot of plans that are under wraps, and we'll leave them there. But what can you tell us about how you feel about this next stage for CryptoPunks, as somebody who led punks for a few years?
Yeah, I'm really excited that CryptoPunks are in a nonprofit, and and I think that even Yuga came to that realization themselves, and really wanted them to land in this home. So kudos to everyone involved, Benny, Mickey, everyone on that partnership coming together, or in that acquisition coming together. For Node specifically, I'd say that what I'm most excited about is they are committed to the presentation of digital art. And so right now, and I don't think this is not under wraps, but Matt and John and the Node team, we are, Amanda Schmidt is also working on this. Phil, we're working on the curation of this really large scale exhibition that presents CryptoPunks in a new way that they've never really been seen. And we're pushing it beyond, okay, hey, look, And this is so valid, but like, hey, look, here's a CryptoPunk on a wall or a grid of CryptoPunks. It is like, let's tell the story of the marketplace. Let's tell the story of the aesthetics of economics. Let's tell the story of the community. I mean, really, in some ways, we're like taking some of the work that's in the book or, presenting all the angles and then presented in this new way. So I think like, for me, like if CryptoPunks are the digital portraits of our time, I think Meebits are like kind of the digital sculpture portraits of our time. And I think that's how Matt and John really see them too. So yeah.
Yeah, I know. I had a coffee with John right after he came back from, I think he spent like a week with Matt and you guys out there in Palo
Yeah.
Alto working on the Note Museum and everything. And I mean, they're always such upbeat guys, and I love them. But he was just on a different level, just happy, glowing. He was like so excited talking about the demolition plans, and I'm like, okay, they're just taking like the old like whatever fixtures down. He was so excited about that. And I love that. I was like, yes, this is excitement that we all feel, and I'm so glad that they're like back in the scene almost because they took obviously a lot of personal time after the toxicity of 22, like really pushed them away. You have a very close, good, both professional and personal relationship with Matt and John. I mean, for me, buying Meebits, I wasn't thinking of it as like it was going to bring me closer to them, but it's been one of those big pluses that it's priceless, and I've really enjoyed my time with them, which has been minuscule compared to what you've been able to experience. But they still remain, even though they're like so accessible, and we so mad at the people event, just having a lot of fun. And they're there at the punk brunches. They came to the Meebits
Yeah.
merch event. They're accessible, but it's not that easy to get through to like spending time with them. But you have. So what can you tell us about just Matt and John as artists, individuals, human beings, like from a friend perspective?
Friend perspective. Wow. I mean, I did this in my resignation tweet where I said, they say never meet your heroes, that's like a saying. And it's actually been really incredible to meet them. And they are my heroes. And they are so humble and smart. They're strong. They're really, really strong. Like, they're they seem easygoing and they are, but like they know what they want. They're clear in that vision, and they're not afraid to get their hands dirty. And then like on Matt's just like hysterical and fun and like just really playful and mischievous, and I'm always laughing, and John always laughing. I would say that that's almost what makes us like our work together and our time together the best, is that we're always laughing at no matter what happens. And I feel like it's gotten to the point now where I can almost like predict what's going to make them chuckle, and I'll look over there, give a little eye, so I don't know if that's a really good answer, but they're just good people, and they care, and their values are in a place that I am in really alignment with, and they're hardworking. And yeah, don't let their easygoing nature fool you though, because they're fucking strong-willed for sure. They know what they want.
Amazing. I mean, you have to kind of know to change the art world, the tech world. Yeah, I think people similar to you, right? People don't know their professional background, like the Android days, Google and Spotify, like all that stuff that they built before, always pushing whatever space they were in forward. Yeah, it's been, again, like I said, it's been priceless to spend time with them one on one and connect with them, and I'm just really excited to have them back, kind of like tipping their toes back in, and obviously with the museum opening up, it's gonna be pretty cool.
And they're
Now
very
we're
committed, just to say, they're very committed. I mean, in a lot of our conversations, we talk a lot about Meebits, and they're really excited about what you're doing, and they respect your leadership a lot. And I can tell they're excited. It matters to them, and they want the story of their work to really be told. And the background and the context, and that community to thrive. So
awesome. Well, I've always said we're stewarding their legacy, and that's something that we always keep in mind with everything we do with Meebits. It's just like, hey guys, we're working with John and Matt's legacy here,
yeah.
so we really want to push it forward. I guess we're coming at time here, but I do want to talk Meebits on the Meebits
Yes.
podcast with Stone. you have a Meebit. It looks kind of like you. She's really, 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 I think, very iconic Meebit. We'll show it here on screen on the podcast. But what is your personal take on Meebits? And then maybe if you could share a little bit more about what you've discovered about Meebits, both through, we now know you like to do research, but also just talking to Matt and John,
Yeah.
casually.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting to me, what's my take on Meebits is now understanding them in the context of generative digital sculpture as I've gotten in deeper into Matt and John telling me about how they built them, the process, etc. I realized how intricate Meebits are, and how much there is in that project and the difficulty of working with voxels and really, like when I step back and think about Meebits as art, I think what we're starting to see, some of the greatest artists of our time right now are working in the gaming world, like, period, and the next generation of children, our generation, like, we live in these virtual worlds. And it's just such a natural fit for to ladder into that tradition of gaming and experimentation in these worlds. So that's my take specifically on Meebits and what I think the opportunity is there. I think what's been interesting for me also about Meebits is, like, I do see them as cousins to CryptoPunks specifically, like more so than autoglyphs. I mean, it's a family, right? But I really see those two in conversation. And, honestly, back in the Yuga days, like the Punks and Meebits teams would be in conversation, right? And what I thought was really interesting about some of the early thinking on Meebits was, like, that DNA of who is a Meebits holder. And it's a bit like friendlier and, I would say, truthfully, less affluent, but curious and new to the space. And those two projects are in relationship to each other, and those two communities are in relationship to each other. And I think what's been exciting for me to see is, I think the punk community, and I'd say largely due to you, Sergito, in a lot of ways in your stewardship, like, the two are cousins again. It feels like family. And it feels like the punks community is really rallying also behind the Meebits community and wants the Meebits community to succeed and grow and thrive. And so that's what I see on Meebits. Not like I don't have like a clear thesis, but what I find most interesting is, I think, as the conversation around video game and gaming and that place in the art world rises, I think it's going to, one, attract a new audience to museums, and two, I think Meebits will rise in that like trajectory as that happens.
Now, you're the second person on this podcast out of 12. Well, I guess we had 13 guests because we had an episode with two artists, who brings up the video game angle.
Yeah.
Raul Powell is a dear friend and has been on a collecting rampage. When he came on the podcast, also towards the end of our episode, we talked about Meebits and his perspective. And he just collected an amazing robot. I'm so happy that his collection is growing. He's got a 3D guy that looks like him and now the robot. But he was the same thing. He's like, video game art is stuff that really will resonate with maybe the newer generations that are growing up with that aesthetic, just like we did with the pixelated stuff, right? Like, I'm an 80s kid. I remember playing arcade games with the pixelated characters. Like, that's why punks immediately just drew my attention. Maybe some of the other NFTs didn't, because that was a different aesthetic than what, like, I wanted to associate with. So that's awesome to hear. Now, again, we're almost at time, but just would love to get some of your final thoughts on anything and everything: Larva, Node, Punks, Meebits, Stoneworks. What can you leave us with?
Um, yeah, final thoughts. I think something that I guess is like my final thought is, like, kind of just feeling like such a deep connection to you in this moment and the role that you're in as a steward of something that is so sacred and important and meaningful to the artists and to also to this community and also to this entire space and digital art. And it's a lot of pressure on your shoulders, and you're carrying it really well. And trust me, there's literally no one else in the world that I think can relate more specifically. And I think what I like seeing in your stewardship is you're really here to understand what the artist's intent is, and you are a vehicle for that. So I guess that's what came up for me. Something a little emotional, I guess.
I love it. No, that's very much you, and I love that
Yeah.
you share that with us. I appreciate the very kind words there. It always just makes me feel incredibly lucky to be in this position to steward this IP that I fell in love with, 4 years ago, and now with, obviously, thank you to our investors that want confirmation, and then obviously Yuga Labs that approached us and are also part of our investors as well to let us continue on with the legacy of John and Matt, and obviously to them for remaining as part of the initiatives, and then people like you who have reached out, said, hey, let me know if you need anything and we can help in any way, and so it's been just really, really cool to just feel that love from the community and from the ecosystem. So I appreciate the kind words, appreciate you being here today. I know you're super, super, super busy with everything that's going on, all this new stuff that you're building, all the other stuff that you're helping, kind of like carry across the finish line. It's been honestly a pleasure to just call you a friend. It's a great honor. Obviously, our first time we met, I kicked you out of the Punks Telegram. We'll end on that story. For anybody that spent the 30 minutes to listen to the full episode, yes, I gotta come clean. I was on vacation, and the Punks Telegram lit up with the news that Stone and her team were, fully stepping into the public role of leading punks, and people were just punks are very opinionated. And as one of the admins in the Telegram, I always get tapped to step into debates, political, religious, just people attacking each other, death threats. And I was on vacay. I was literally in Aspen, and I was just enjoying the very little free time that I take. And there's people just pulling me in every direction. I was like, you know what? We're just gonna kick out the whole Yuga team, so that punks can fight it out without external eyes on it, and then we'll bring him back in. And he was like, it's 24 hours, but I felt terrible. And then
No, don't feel terrible.
in a weird way, it made us bond really early, which I appreciate.
Super early. And then I always know that you're someone who's going to do what you believe is the right thing and stands by that with a lot of courage. And for me, I was like, you know what? People should be able to talk about it. This is awkward that I'm here, so I respect the decision, and I was never upset. I was just like, oh shit. But it also did bond us. I agree. I feel like it's such a great origin story, and you don't always get great origin stories. And weirdly, I have I have two other good friends that started with a fight, and then we're really close. It's me. Maybe it's
it wasn't a fight. It was more people wanted to talk about it, and you guys were there, so they couldn't, so they could pull. It was a interesting time in the punks lore. It's just one of those things that, again, feel very lucky to have been in that space at that time to experience that.
I didn't know an announcement was going to happen. I also was surprised that day, so I was just actually weirdly working on the book, and we were doing interviews, behind the scenes interviews, and I walk out and I see everything has blown up, and I was like, wow, heads up would have been nice.
Hey, tech startup at the end of the day, obviously you got very established now, but they're still a tech startup.
They are.
The whole space is, and some stuff you just learn along the way.
Yeah.
Stone, what a pleasure to have you and your smile here on the podcast. It's been awesome to see your growth as a punk lead. So now, artist, Web3 professional, and you're just always, always, always going to have a friend, a supporter, a cheer team in the whole Meebits community. Thank you for stopping by.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.